Hello, friends. How are you today? Uranus and the star Algol, they meet once again. They met in the sky this time, very early in the morning, Sunday, May 4th, 2025. And Uranus will still be at the degree of the star Algol for the full moon on May 12th. So this energy is going to last through the rest of May, and it will keep going beyond that because this has been a long-term cycle. And it really, really affects us and impacts us. So have you been having issues with identity, sort of knowing the truth of who you are? Has it felt like there's been something between you and that? Alternatively, have you felt pulled down towards sadness, depression, separation, these feelings? Alternatively, have you felt the life force well up within you and help you to establish yourself as, okay, I'm doing this and I'm moving forward? Are there groups buzzing around you or offers to engage that seem to pull you away from the truth of who you are? All these things are possible now and the last several weeks or months. In fact, I think that our societal issues with these concepts are a lot around the fact that these two energies are at play, because this week is the last time for over 80 years that Uranus will meet the star Algol. So this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to stand apart, to know the truth of yourself, of who you are, of what you want to be, and how do you want to embody this. And you can also use this time as an activation for these things. And if you felt tossed in the currents, like tossed by the waves of energy, or alternatively pulled down and separated from oneself, then this is a time to recenter and regain that footholding, to hold fast to the truth of, how God made you, how your soul manifested within your human form, and what that really means for you, right? What's your mission? What's your soul level purpose and mission? Well, this is a time where these themes are fantastically activated. And the amazing blessing, of this time and the lunar year that we're in, from spring of 2025 to spring of 2026, is that some of these themes are ongoing. For example, the theme of the lunar year, one of the core ones, was the Chiron Mars square, right? Mars in the home, Chiron in Aries. And so how do we move forward in our mastery and activate that? Okay, that's the meaning of that square in its elevated state, right? How do we do that effectively? Well, knowing who you are, right? Being able to embody that, to assess yourself, your state of being. This assists you with bringing out your mastery. So let's get into the details of how the energy works. Well, here's the star Algol. Hello, friends. I just wanted to mention that I do readings. I do readings of astrology and energy. So if you're interested in that, send me an email from my website. I'll put the link in the video, or you can contact me through my Substack, or put a message in the YouTube comments or on X to me. So I'd love to work with you. Interesting, because the star Algol is actually 3 stars in one. We call it one star name, but it's 2 stars that orbit each other and a third star out here all alone, okay? And in the Greek mythology, these are the Gorgon sisters. So these are monstrous sisters. And here's their third sister, okay, who's also monstrous, because all of these beings have like snakes for hair, and they're probably somewhat challenging, right, to get along with. Now, snakes for hair is another way of indicating energetic ties together, right? Because it's like a line of energy that comes out and wants to connect. Snakes are known for, they can bite you, right? They can reach out and do that. Energetically, it's like a representation of, here I am, and here are all the chords that I want to do with you, right? And in that chording, a person could feel more stable energetically because they've courted with you, and maybe you've courted with them energetically. You've made certain agreements there in that energetic relationship. And ultimately, energy is flowing through these chords. So, this is also in the giver and taker dynamic. Is someone taking too much from you? Is someone giving too much? Do you give too much to others? Or do you need to be in a power position all the time? Or are you always a victim? That's kind of all these dynamics that come into play here. It's also the theme of division, right? Because this star is divided from these two stars. She's at a distance from these two. And it's so fascinating because there are so many offers of division now. And what I like to do is I like to do what I call reading the codes. If I see an offer of division, now I know what that is. It's an offer to separate me from myself. So let's look at personally, how does this energy influence us? Well, here we are. Okay, here, if we look at this as individuals, here is a construct that's operating. This could be a family dynamic. This could be a societal dynamic. This could be a cultural dynamic. This could be any group in which you operate that has kind of rules of engagement. It could be a workplace. And if that's not resonant, right, because in this star pattern, Algol, one star stands apart. That implies that there's something going on here. Maybe this dynamic isn't resonant. Maybe this person just stands alone and apart. That's just their nature. Maybe there's an offer of division here, and all of these bodies can get along if they accept their basic natures, right? The nature of this star is to stand apart. The nature of these two stars are to rotate together. And in fact, the stars take energy. One of the stars takes energy from the other star every time it passes. That's a dynamic of the Algol system. And so see here, this star here. This star has a tendency to feel alone, abandoned, and that can put that energy in a depressive state. Right? That is the illusion. Why is it an illusion? Because this is a star. It's always shining. It has its own fuel source, right? It's always perfect. This is how this part of the heavens were created. So what happens is that, star that's at a distance, and in the human realm, we can feel a pulling towards something that can be very strong. Here you are in your heart, in your authenticity. And what happens if you decide to step out of that, right? And that would be like this. What happens if this star tried to step out of itself to be with these two stars? Clearly that's not possible. The star's not going to move over there. Right? That's its cosmic position in the heavens. And it's so interesting because, these are energy themes going back to ancient times, playing out here. And so what happens is when we try to step out of the truth of who we are, guess what happens? No. Oh. As I was saying, when you try to step out of the truth of who you are, it can feel gut-wrenching. And in fact, my dog just threw up all over the couch right as I was about to say that. And so stepping out of the truth, and now he's back. He went and hid for a while. Love you. Okay, you can get up there, okay? When you try to step out of the truth of who you are, it is gut-wrenching and you feel awful. Accepting your nature, especially when it's somehow you're different, or that's the story you're operating under. It can feel gut-wrenching. And it can put the body in, just a terrible state. And it can lead to ill health, okay, in my view. It can lead to ill health. We all know this at some level. And so, as I was trying to show you, the heart darkens, and that doesn't feel good. The heart darkens when we are inauthentic. And we feel more and more separated. From whom? Not from the group. If you step out of your authenticity and give that up to be part of the group, what happens? You actually start to feel alone. You may have thought you were feeling alone before, but separate yourself from how God truly made you to be. Separate yourself from the purity of your own soul. Now, it feels like being on a ship, an empty vessel tossed about on the ocean. And we feel very vulnerable when we are in this state of energy. Where's the heart? Where's the soul connection? Right? The power of this person is now just taken from them. But did it get taken or did they give it up themselves? Was it a betrayal from the outside world or did this person first betray themselves? Well, the good news is that you can make a new choice at any moment and become the truth of who you are. You can become the fully powered, soul-powered star that you always were meant to be by making a new choice and turning back to the divinity within and the guidance that's there for you. And, you can call this turning back to God. You can call this, turning back towards the purity of your own soul or regaining the purity of your own soul. And there are a lot of cultural themes, right now that tell us how we are supposed to identify, right? Or that give us very strong guidelines. And the fact of the matter is you are a living soul in human form. What is the truth of you as a soul? What are the divine principles that honor that? Because this life is always ultimately between you and that, you and your own soul, you and God, you and the Creator. How do you want to live it? How do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And what can get you off the couch to live that life perfectly, which is a life that's full of, mistakes as well as blessings. You know, when we return back to that and just accept our own selves first, we're much more comfortable. You know, like my dog back on the couch, all cozy, he let go, right, of what was not aligned for his body, right? He threw something up. That's in the trash now, right? So these are metaphors for how we can live. And ultimately, you know, what I have found is that although there are challenges in returning to that truth, and the theme of the year, the Mars-Chiron square, a square is a challenge. I mean, it's not easy to activate that. Mars in the sign of the moon, Cancer, the moon, the embodiment of the soul in human form. Challenged to master that, Chiron in Aries. And it can feel like life or death. You know, these two planetary bodies were at 22 degrees. That is a life or death energy. Well, guess what? Next week, when the full moon happens, the May 12th full moon, the sun is going to be and the moon are going to be at 22 degrees. And so once again, it's going to feel like a life or death situation. It's going to feel the stress of that. You're going to feel that within. And the truth of this is that when we embody our own soul, that is life. That is the everlasting life. That is the eternal life within us. And returning home to that, you know, being the authentic you and throwing up and throwing out what is between you and that purity within. It's challenging, but that is what leads to life. You know, that is what leads to embodying soulfully, living your purpose. And for me, a lot of that has been just walking the path to get there in the first place. You know, I found that God gave me dreams in my heart, in my life. And I found that I had to change to embody that dream and to live the dream. And as time went on, it became very clear to me that how I was inspired to change, to be more fully who I am, because I was so passionate about this dream. And a part of me still deeply is, still passionate about my dreams for, you know, that I've been given for myself. That I was willing to do the work and make the effort to change, you know, my very nature expressed into the world so that I could more fully be my living soul in human form, me, truly. And in the astrology, this is the opposition between the first house and the seventh house. The first house, the face of your personality living in the world, and the seventh house, your relationships. And the opposition of these two things, like the third star and the two stars together, the first house and the seventh house. The contrast between us and the group, us and our friends, us and, you know, whoever, our relationships, that contrast is there in part to teach us who we really are. And maybe we can learn from that and learn something of vital importance. Learn something that is the truth of our own soul.